I just want you to go deeper on that. When I asked you about the portfolio of work that you are working on now, I want to know more on estate planning, exactly what that entails, and then also get into company structures and tell us exactly what it entails, and also tell me the connection between the two, right? Because one might be having a company, it's growing, but they need estate planning and succession planning to be able to hand over to the next generation.
Yes.
And what sort of structures do they need to put in place to successfully do that?
All right, estate planning effectively is protecting your assets. And that's from the time you acquire them, accumulate them, and then when you pass away. So that starts, you can start off with drafting a will, which in any case could be done by a professional attorney, by yourself, which I don't advise, because there's certain aspects of interpretation or certain aspects you may miss in drafting a will. So we always recommend that an attorney drafts a will for you. And then that goes into your financial planning, whether you have life insurances, retirement annuities, provident funds, pensions, credit life policies, where you've got loans that you've taken out, whether for business or for your home, for instance, home loans. And then we also look at your company structures, whether you've got company structures in place and whether those are maintained on a regular basis. That's your shareholders agreements, buy and sell agreements, in terms of the documents that are used to protect yourself going forward. For instance, as a director, have you signed suretyship for any loans that are in place? And with yourself being in the entrepreneurial sector and sphere, you notice that business is not something that grows in straight lines. You have your ups and downs. And so preparing for those difficult times in business, that your family and your assets are protected while you're alive and when you pass away.
Okay. So how does that tie into trusts and company structures? Are those things, do they work hand in hand? How does it work?
Yes, so they work hand in hand. As I mentioned, estate planning is for protection of your assets. It's for you to save on expenses, for your administration of estates, to save on taxes. If you structure your company, your trust, or your companies and your will in a way that they are all reading the same and they work well together. So we've had instances where you have companies, but your trust is a shareholder. And in that, you are now building your portfolio in the trust and not having to pay estate duty later because most of your assets are in the trust already.
Okay.
And understanding trust administration works with the company and works with your estate planning to your benefit. If you've got minor children, you want to also ensure that they are taken care of. So your will would then appoint a guardian that would take care of them. You don't want to die without a will, which is called intestate, and it is governed by the laws of intestate succession, where if there's any cash that's available to a minor who's under the age of 18, that goes to the guardian fund for the government to manage. You can't invest that. You have to then go and apply for funds, prove that those funds are needed for a minor. And then also having an executor that's appointed in your will. You want to have someone that's trustworthy, that you know that's going to execute your final wishes according to what you would like to happen with your assets. So having that plan of succession with your assets in your estate, as well as a plan of succession in your company, is very important. You don't want the company and everything you've invested die with you. You want it to go on. And that's the whole thing of generating generational wealth and legacy, is that you want it to be perpetuated through generations. And that's what trusts do. It can work up to 4 generations if you structure it in such a way that you list your beneficiaries correctly, you draft your trust deed. And all of this may be overwhelming to someone who's just starting off. But we're saying start somewhere. Start with drafting a will. And if that's going to cost you money, look for opportunities where service providers like attorneys, accountants, tax practitioners, business advisors and financial advisors are making offers available For instance, in September, we as attorneys usually have Wills Week, where the Legal Practice Council encourages us to serve the public by drafting wills for free. Why not take that opportunity? Service providers are always looking to make new clients, including ourselves. Yes. So we're willing to offer things that are, and advices or opportunities that would benefit them and us to grow our clientele base, but also to serve the public. So, coming to a professional and saying, I want more understanding on how this would work or affect me would be, let's start from the beginning. We had previously had a discussion about this being the foundation of a building. The foundation of a building is very important. My daughter loves architecture at such a young age. She loves buildings. And one of her favorite buildings is the Burj Khalifa. The Burj Khalifa is the tallest building in the world, 829 meters, if I'm not mistaken. But the architects and the engineers have mentioned that the higher you go, the deeper the foundations have to be. So I look at estate planning, company structures, financial advice, all as those foundational poles and rafts and steel structures that are going to help you to build the legacy, to build the protection you need for your assets and for your family going forward, by starting small, yes, but being wise and prudent and saying, as I develop my portfolio, as I dispose of assets, as I accumulate assets, as my marital status changes, as my family expands, these are the kinds of things that I'm putting in place to protect me and my family. I found that there are many entrepreneurs and clients that have gone into business, but they married in community of property. How can we now safeguard them? How can we safeguard their family home? How can we provide for their children if something happens to them? So there are legal instruments that we can use as we go forward, but we need to know where you are and where you're at. It's difficult to do estate planning if you've developed a portfolio of 50 million rand. There are going to be certain expenses and legal expenses that you're going to incur, which you could have saved if you just started.
What are those expenses for at that moment?
So
move properties,
yes,
shares? Yeah.
That's correct. So moving shares, moving properties, you'll have transfer costs. You can trigger capital gains because it's disposing of assets, shares. So all of these kinds of things, you need to have the proper legal advice to get a holistic view of how you need to estate plan and plan your estate. So your estate and my estate may be different, but we can tailor that advice to what you need right now and going forward. And we always advise that estate planning is something that's ongoing, and we should be revisiting these structures at least once a year to look at where you're at in your life. Have you disposed of this asset? Have you accumulated more assets? Have you got a child that needs, care for the future? One of the things I've also realized with estate planning and having proper structures is that you limit the litigation, you limit the family disputes, because something about death triggers a backlog of issues with the family that when you don't have a will in place and you don't have these structures, you have uncles and aunts and family members and even spouses while they're grieving, or children while they're grieving, trying to sort out problems that should have been sorted out while you were